right, let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
So, hey everyone, welcome to the Harper Committee meeting. So, we released the Harper 2.1. If you go into releases, so you see we GA'd it last week. So, this has all the features that we've been talking about, the non-blocking garbage collection, proxy cache, the P2P integration with Kraken and Dragonfly, static image scanner, and then support for Kubernetes, machine learning data models. So please give it a try. I think the website and the docs have all been updated to reflect the latest version. The only thing left is the blog, which is under review. It's coming out very soon. And then I believe the Helm version comes out at the end of this week. So yeah, the proxy cache capability I think is particularly opportune because of the recent Docker Hub announcement on rate limiting. So the proxy cache goes a long way to help mitigate against that, because you're no longer pulling so much from Docker Hub or another upstream registry. You're pulling from the cache when possible. I did notice that when I was writing up about this feature, that the proxy cache feature in the blog, that there's something we can actually do. We can improve upon. So if you go through the Docker Hub blog on the new rate limiting, which goes into effect on November 1st. So you have 100 polls per 6 hours for anonymous and 200 polls for authenticated users. And the limit is actually based on the number of get manifest requests, whereas it was previously based on image blobs. So now you can, even though if the image is completely intact, if none of the image blobs were updated, you're still triggering the rate limiter. So we sort of designed this feature prior to this announcement, but in anticipation of this development, right? Because users have been coming to us and talking about they were getting rate limited by Docker Hub already. But essentially, right now, every time you hit a proxy project, the proxy is hitting the upstream to see if the image has been updated before it, either serves you what's in the cache or reaches out to get the updated copy from Docker Hub and then sync it down to you. But it's actually doing a pull manifest request. So we are also triggering the rate limiter. Every time we compare the digest to see if we have to repull. So I kind of realized that as I was writing up the blog. And so there's going to be, I've already filed a ticket here for the 2.2 to change from a get request to a head request. So if the image hasn't been updated, you're not triggering that rate limiter. You're only triggering it if you're, getting a newer copy of that image. So it should be much better.
That's fantastic. When you brought up the Docker Hub thing, I was going to ask if it was a head request. You're already on it. I love it.
Yeah, I wish we had caught this earlier, but I guess we just didn't read between the lines that they were, charging based on get requests and instead of image blobs. So, but it will be part of the 2.1.1, which is coming out, mid-October. So you will have that. You're still mitigating against the rate limiting in some respect right now, because even if the image wasn't updated, even if you had hit that limit already, you can still serve what's in the cache as a backup, as a fallback, right? But with this improvement, it'll be a lot better.
So what happens with the proxy cache here, if we are at or above the limit already, and we try to pull down another image, will we get an error somewhere in the proxy cache logs, or what's happening?
I haven't tried, but I'm guessing we'll get a log. We'll get an error. I don't know how that's going to be reflected in the error.
So,
in the logs.
is it going to be true throttling, where basically they might slow your speed, or would they just deny the request? I don't know. I don't know the answers to that, Alex.
I think they would just deny the request right now. Not throttle. Just yeah, you wouldn't be able to
similar
pull.
to how GitHub does it. If you've done too many requests, it just cut you off, and you get a little timer essentially.
Right. Well, we can try it. It's easy to test that theory. But we'll have something in the logs that reflect that it's not, it's being throttled by the client.
I'm just wondering, so the proxy cache will capture the error, but it won't give an error to the client. It will still serve the local cached version then.
You're right. That's a separate case, because the only cases we cover right now are, if the image is non-existent in the upstream, in which case, we interpret it as it's intentional and they no longer want to serve that image. So we wouldn't even serve what's in the cache. Or if the cache is not reachable, then we treat it as the cache is down. I'm sorry, not the cache, the upstream. Then we'll just serve what's in the cache. In the case where the cache blocks you, it's a little ambiguous, but I think it would just serve what's in the cache, because it's not able to reach it in that sense.
We should try it out, see what happens.
We should test it. Yep.
Seems like something that might make a reasonable feature flag, because I could see some users wanting it to just serve what's in the cache, because after all, that's why they've deployed a cache. But some users would want, no, if the upstream's down or blocking it, then we want to pass through that authorization failure.
Right. Yeah,
I
can think about making it a flag.
It depends on your tolerance for staleness in your images, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
do we have a way to schedule the cached images?
Schedule in what sense? Schedule how long they're kept for? Or?
Yeah, no, schedule updates essentially.
No, the behavior right now is it'll always reach out to the upstream to see if it's to see if it's stale, and if it is, it'll always update it. We talked about.
Sorry. If you want scheduled updates, that's the replication feature, right?
Yeah,
does that work with the proxy cache though?
What do you mean, does it work with the proxy cache?
No, I mean, so if I set up a replication, that's a different target, right? With replication, we're putting the registry that we're pulling from is then the
as the endpoint.
Yeah. So you wouldn't serve
I guess
replicated images from the proxy cache. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there is no scheduled proxying ability right now. If it's on, it's triggered by an actual pull, right? Whether it's through your pod YAML or whether it's through a Docker pull command.
Okay.
There's no scheduled hitting the proxy cache and then to hit the upstream. Not yet. We kept the MVP experience pretty basic. We thought about adding more stuff into it, but that's ultimately why we decided to just leverage the creating the project, like the Harbor project. It's the exact same process, except you enable it as a proxy cache, and pretty much all the other features within the project have been disabled, except for the retention policy. There's a default retention policy of 7 days, and So we do anticipate, adding more to this feature overall. But I think the most important thing right now is fixing changing from a GET request to a HEAD request. That would go a long way to mitigate against the strict rate limiting.
Awesome.
And I also wanted to share, we have the 2.2 feature hopper pretty much nailed down. You can go to the project page it's from within the main harbor page, just go into projects and then go into the harbor project board to look at the 2.2 project suggestion swim lane. So there's going to be a couple of improvements to robot accounts. The one I want to talk about today is really exposing metrics. So this is something that we've talked about a lot, exposing metrics through Prometheus to an endpoint where Prometheus can script the data. And there's actually a proposal that's been put out. If you go into the community repo under pull request, there's an add metrics for Harbor. So we can just take a quick look at this. So yeah, basically, essentially, we landed on Prometheus for metrics and observability, expose, the relevant statistics in Harbor, whether that's on the infrastructure it's running on, whether it's on the Kubernetes cluster, the orchestration itself, or some of the business logic, some of the registry operations, everything that's currently exposable through API is potentially a candidate for exposing to Prometheus. We haven't really nailed down the final bucket list of what we want to expose. Going to try to keep 2.2 pretty simple, just to make sure that the framework works. And so here's a proposal that talks about what we want to expose, how to expose it, and then two possible solutions for exposing it to Prometheus. And so, yeah, the contents to expose, we talked about, these are just some of the basic things that are listed here. Request in flight, anything from API, metrics provided by Docker distribution itself. I think, telemetry can be divided into several layers. There's, at the very basic, there's the platform, which is a node-level information like CPU, RAM, disk, basic event logging, like health status. And then there's the orchestration piece, whether it runs as a Docker Compose cluster or as a Kubernetes cluster. And then, related to that, some of the registry operations, or not registry operations, but the Harbor registry infrastructure itself, deployed services and any kind of cron jobs. And then finally, there's the business piece, right, which is all the registry operations, anything that Harbor API provides. So you can see here in how to expose, or just focusing on exposing core. But eventually we're going to be covering all the different pods as part of the Harbor deployment. Like, I don't know, there's core, registry, job service, database, Nginx, Chart Museum, Redis, right? Like all of these can be exposed. And then there's the exporter here. The exporter is basically running to collect and forward these service stats from all the various Harbor components to the Prometheus endpoint. Yeah, we're looking at OpenTelemetry as a collector. So like in the second solution here, the collector would run to collect data from all the different sidecars that are deployed on each component, on each pod, and then push that to the Prometheus endpoint. What else? Add labels to Harbor components. I guess this is referring to Kubernetes labels. You can use Kubernetes labels and annotations and taints to, they can already be leveraged by Prometheus service discovery to expose Kubernetes concepts. The last thing is, how do we run the Prometheus as part of, whether it's part of the Harbor cluster operator as a whole, or if it's just something that the Harbor cluster operator can call through a CRD or something like that. And I think, particularly when it's deployed as through our Harbor operator as an HA cluster, there's a lot more information, HA related metrics. We want to look at possibly dead processes, looking at the HA health status of each of the different components, like PGSQL, Redis cache, persistent storage. So this is a basic proposal. Just glancing through this, I would add that, everything should be exported by projects. So report generation can be, tied to tenants. Maybe also be able to export the data over a certain period of time, so you can easily put those into some sort of a time series data volume. So this is something that we've talked about for a long time. Unfortunately, we kept putting it off, but we're finally getting around to it. And the metrics for, if you want your registry to be part of your Kubernetes strategy, then this is definitely important. So Tianan, if you have any comments on the design here, or anything you want to, to be exposed to Prometheus specifically, please, go through this and make some comments. So that's what I want to share today, specifically on the Prometheus integration. And then I can talk about the robot accounts one on the next meeting when we have more. But essentially, we're doing a couple things for robot accounts. We're scoping robot accounts to the instance level instead of creating a robot at the project level. So instead of going into a project to create a robot, you're going to be creating a robot account, or I guess they should be called, they function like a service account at the system level, or you can add permissions for that robot account to different projects at creation and be able to dynamically change those permissions. The other thing is we're probably going to open up API access for robot accounts, which is currently not available when deployed with OIDC, but that's something also users have been asking for. And I think there's a lot of value in that. So yeah, please go through the 2.2 product suggestions swimmingly, because we're in early planning right now. We don't really have a date locked down for release, so it's going to depend on the particular payload that we want to deliver. But definitely go through and add any questions and comments you have. I don't know if Michael or Jonas have anything else to add for the release or the community or in general.
No, this is great. Nothing else to add from me. Thank you.
I was just wondering if you wanted to go over the peer-to-peer function.
Sure. I don't have a doc here. Let me. So I can just talk about it a little bit. Essentially, with what we did in the 2.1 release for P2P integration is we allow users to deploy a P2P solution like Alibaba Dragonfly or Uber Kraken, and have those be paired against Harbor as an endpoint. Think of it as like a registry endpoint that you can use for replication. And there's an action within Harbor called preheating. The name is still in flux. We might change it, but essentially, what preheating does is it migrates images from Harbor to the P2P side, to the P2P network, where the content is seeded through a series of nodes that's highly available and highly distributed to distribute those images to thousands or possibly tens of thousands of nodes at a much more efficient, much faster rate than we could ever do through Harbor itself. We've sort of offloaded that work to the P2P side, and they all have their own way of doing it. So we're sort of opening up that ecosystem by doing it the way we did, allowing you to pair against any number of external P2P solutions. And so, preheating an image is very similar to deploying image or pulling image, because it signifies a deployment of that image into the wild. And that's why we have security policies controlling the preheating action, which means that much like you can configure security policies for pulling an image off Harbor, you can set a policy like disallow pulling an image if it's unsigned, or disallow preheating the image if it's unsigned, or disallow preheating image if it has a scan vulnerability of a certain severity or higher, right? We're sort of borrowing from that workflow in the project configurations for image pulling. But the one thing that we added is you can specify the specific repository names and the tag names on which to match against, and then have those policies overlay on top to determine how the preheating is triggered. So this is all doable from within the Harbor UI. You add the endpoint, you turn on, you configure the policies that you want, and then, yep, it's very easy.
That's really cool.
Any questions or comments related to P2P or Prometheus or anything else around 2.1? I also want to just say real quick that we released the 2.0.3 as well, and there is a certain bug that crops up. I've seen it within 2 customers already. Essentially, let me go to release source real quick to open up the issue. Full list of issues in 2.3. Yeah, in certain cases when you're upgrading from the 1.9 and 1.10, I believe, to the 2.0.x, it can happen that the repository IDs turn negative, and that can be problematic. So please upgrade to 2.0.3. So that's all I wanted to share about the recent releases and the upcoming 2.2. So
I was going to ask around like the 2.0 and the recent 1.10s and even the 1.7 that happened recently. I was wondering like what goes into deciding whether or not it's worth making a release of an old version like that. Is that published somewhere?
yeah, so we usually do N-2 for features, for bugs. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, no, we have that documented. So if you go on our GitHub under community, we have a release.
You're right. I just forgot where it was.
I think it's called releases.md.
Yep.
There you go. And it talks about how we deal with this. Maybe we should update now, Alex. Now we have 2.1. So there you go.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, we talk about the policy there, but then, maybe we should update that minor release support matrix, just update it really quickly now.
I'll do that after the call.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I saw the 1.7 and it stood out to me because that's more than 2 old. So I was wondering, like, was it a major security fix or something?
It's a Vic release, right? You mean you saw the 1.7 release recently?
Yeah, there was the 177, I think it was, that was like a month ago.
It's used specifically by a product by a strategic customer, so we had to roll out an update for it.
Yeah, that was an exception.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Otherwise, it's N-2 for N-2 minor releases. And for things like vulnerabilities, we always adhere to that. But for some of the smaller things like a UI issue or, a typo or something like that, we still adhere to this pretty strictly. But, the actual release dates really depends on our bandwidth.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Sure. All right. I don't know if there's anything else anybody wants to share, but that's it for me.
Cool.
All right. I want to check with you, Tiana, how you feel about, doing this at a monthly cadence now that we've moved the US meeting to every month. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think it's great. Frankly, I think it's great that you're doing it at all. Given that there are the other meetings for the actual developers, I think it's great that you're doing a specific community meeting. So I'm happy with whatever cadence you think makes sense. Monthly is totally fine for me.
Great. Thanks. All right. If there's nothing else, I think we can end here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Alex. Bye, Tianon. Bye, Jonas.
Bye-bye.
Bye.